Good evening, everyone. We continue our study in the book of First Samuel, and today we begin a new chapter in chapter 13. Now, the background of chapter 13 is that we always need to bear in mind, or at least at the back of our minds, at the end of the book of Judges, where Samson was there to inflict uh, tragedy upon the Philistines. It goes on that the time of Eli, the Philistines were still around and they had some authority over the Israelites. And we read of the period after Eli when he lost the ark and they were moved around in the land of the Amalekites. And more than that, you find that the uh, the, the the Philistines still remain as a perennial enemy of the Israelites. There were officials, right? If we were to read back in chapter 10, where there were officials of the Philistines around, it just tells us that everywhere you would actually see some of the Philistines. Now, chapter 13 brings that focus on the Philistines to bear now that they have a king in Saul. And so we begin that narrative to look at Saul in his reign in chapter 13, verse 1. Now we have this phrase, and Saul was 30 years old um, when he began to reign, and he reigned 42 years over Israel. Now, there's a couple of things that you have to pay attention to is this. Number one, the word 30 is in italics. In this is the NESB and it does not exist. So I'm going to strike it out. You are also seeing another word here, the word 40. And it is in the italics. It's supplied by the translator. And we need to strike it out as well. And so basically, you find that the translation would look something like this. Period of a year of Saul into his reign. And then the next phrase is, and he reigned over Israel 2 years. And so this would be the Hebrew translation of verse 1. And so from here, what we can see is that we are looking at Saul when it was a period of a year into his reign. And the overall period that he reigned was 2 years. It was a very short time. And we will see in chapters 13 through 15 why the reign of Saul was so short. Now, the translators here have added in a lot of words that is not in the Hebrew. And so when you read your Bible, you find that if they are in the italics like this, 30 is in italics, 40 is in italics. And so year here is not years, but a year, and 2 years over Israel. And so that would be well, at least that's what the text is saying. And if you take that perspective and you insert it into the entire history of the ark, of David, of Samuel, you should be able to fit 2 years into that entire historical chronological timeline. But you will not be able to do 42 years right here. Verse 2 is where we begin to see some of the activities to taunt the Philistines. Verse 2 says, now Saul chose for himself 3,000 men of Israel, of which 2,000 were with Saul in Michmash and in the hill country of Bethel. And while 1,000 were with Jonathan at Gibeah of Benjamin. Now understand, Jonathan is the son of Saul, and so he was stationed at the home turf, and he sent away the rest of the people, each to his tent. What does this tell us? Is that at this point in time, Saul is preparing for battle with the Philistines. And out of all the men of Israel, now notice, in battles in the old days, they were only men, there were no women. And we could recognize from Exodus chapter 12, as well as Numbers chapter 1, that the men would be 20 years and above. And so Saul chose. The word chose here essentially says that he examined and decided. These are the 3,000 men. Now, in the Hebrew, the word 3,000 men would be 3 of 1,000. And so you get 3,000 men from Israel, of which 2,000 and 2,000 were with Saul, 1,000 were with Jonathan. So they actually had a total of 3,000 strong, right? 3,000 strong. And if we thought that that would be a lot, then we need to think again. Now, this time, this is about Saul as king, right? Remember, he is king. He made a decision. He is going to do this. He is going to defend his turf, and he's going to, I guess, disturb the Philistines. Now, in verse 3 is quite interesting because verse 3 talks about the first strike. Jonathan is the son of Saul, and it says that he struck, meaning he caused to kill. This is the word, caused to kill, or caused to destroy. And it says here, the garrison of the Philistines. The word garrison here literally means it is well, I would say it is a post of troops in Israel. So it is a Philistines, well, I guess, battalion, right? A guard of soldiers. And they were at Geva, and that's the location. And they had stationed troops. And these are Philistines' troops. And when Jonathan struck them and killed them, the Philistines heard of it. Now, this word "hear" means they heard by word of mouth. It is something that they will talk to each other, and so they heard about this incident. Then Saul blew the trumpet throughout the land, saying, "Let the Hebrews hear." We need to break down a couple of these words. What did he blow? Now, this word "blow" is really to well, I guess, give a blast. And it's not called trumpet here. It would be the shofar. Now, understand that in the days of the Israelites, the shofar is used as a signal by the way it was blown, right? Uh, and this is also for the Hebrews. The Hebrews would be the people, the ones who came from beyond. And who are the Hebrews? We read of Noah, then we have Shem, and one of Shem's descendant is Ever, and from there we have the descendants called the Hebrews, right? The Hebrew people, of which right now they are the Israelites. They are the Hebrew people, and they understand this shofar signal. This was a signal to hear that Saul has struck the Philistines. And so if you read in verse 4, which says, all Israel heard the news that Saul had struck the garrison of the Philistines, and also that Israel has become odious to the Philistines. The people were then summoned to Saul at Gilgal. Now, what? There were a couple of words that we need to figure out, right? This is to had smitten, verse 4. This would be cause to kill, cause to kill. The garrison, which is these are the troops of the Philistines, and also that Israel had become odious. Now, this word odious, it's an English word, but in the Hebrew, this is a very stinking smell. Now, understand, the Hebrew language expresses things in very vivid imagery. And so the Israelites has become stinking to the Philistines. What do you mean by stinking? Now, stinking is a metaphorical understanding. They would see that these people are worthless, useless. They emit this odor. I guess in Oriental terms, they are like cow pies. If you know what I mean, they are like cow dung. Smell a lot, bad smell, and you don't want to go near them. And so the people were then summoned. The word summoned is cause to cry for help, cause to cry for help. And they went to Saul at Gilgal. Now understand this, after this particular incident, which is right here, verse 3, and Jonathan's incident had caused fear among the Israelites because they have disturbed the hornet's nests. And so when they were afraid, they called upon the king, and the king was at Gilgal. So Saul went to Gilgal, and it's important for us then to realize that they are seeking a king. They wanted a king, and now when they have a need for help, they cry out to the king. And so they are turning away from God in that sense because there is a human king above all. Verse 5. Now, verse 5, we need to be very careful with what is being described. The Philistines had assembled together, caused themselves to gather, right? Caused to gather. And why are they gathering? They are gathering to fight. This is to fight, do battle. In the normal times, they just have the Philistines to look after things. But now it is no longer looking after, but it has risen the giant in the Philistines. It has upset them that they are now very angry with Israel because of what Jonathan had done. And in so doing, you should say that Saul had done it, because everybody who is subordinate to Saul, if they did it, then Saul did it. That's the whole way of Hebrew thinking, that it is not Jonathan's fault, but Jonathan had been part and parcel of Saul's army. Now look at how angry the Philistines were. They had actually assembled 30,000 chariots, 6,000 horsemen, and people like the sand which is on the seashore in abundance. They came up and camped in Michmash, east of Beth Aven. Now, when you look at something like this, first of all, the numbers 30,000. And in the Hebrew, it is the 3 of 1,000. Sorry, not 3. 30 of 1,000, right? And then you've got 6,000. This will be 6 of 1,000 horsemen. And what you find is, number one, 30,000 chariots does not include the troops on the chariot. There would be at least 2, the one who is managing the horses, and the other one would be an active soldier, minimum. And then you have 6,000 horsemen. Now you need to understand, in the good old days, people do not ride horses here and there. They use horses for battle. And so it's 1 man to 1 horse. But with the chariots, it could be at least 2. So that could be at least 60,000 plus 6,000, 66,000 people of the Philistines versus 3,000 Israelites. Now, you would see that 66,000 versus 3,000, that is not much of a fight. In fact, it should be over before it starts. But let's read on, verse 6. When the men of Israel saw, now notice in Hebrew, everything is very visual. They visually saw that they were in a strait. Now, the word strait is that they are in a narrow place. That's what it means, in a narrow place. For the people were hard pressed. I guess you could say that they are caused to, how should we say? This hard press is caused to be distressed, right? Not a pleasant time at this point in time. Then the people hid themselves in caves, thickets, cliffs, cellars, and pits. What actually did happen? When you see, can you imagine, when you see 66,000 people, and then you see the troops like sand on the seashore. Now you remember, this is really a phrase like how God promised Abraham that your descendants will be like the stars in the sky, like sand on the seashore. It is an expression. Expression means uncountable. You can't count the sand on the seashore. It's uncountable. It's so many. Actually, 30,000 chariots is already a lot. But all these people, like the sand on the seashore, would really put the fear of God in the Israelites. And the Israelites feel that they are distressed. And so the people hid themselves in caves, in thickets, cliffs, cellars, and pits, just to hide from the Philistines. Why? because they don't want to die. They are beginning to see that Saul might have made a grievous mistake attacking the Philistines. So let's look at verse 7. Remember, Saul is at Gilgal. And so also some of the Hebrews crossed the Jordan into the land of Gad and Gilead. So you notice this is the river, it goes into the Dead Sea. And when you talk about the Hebrews crossing, they're over here. And what they did was they went across and went up, right, to Gad and Gilead. And so they were running away from the Philistines because they saw the 30,000 chariots, 6,000 horsemen. They've never seen so many opposition like that. But as for Saul, he was still in Gilgal, and all the people followed him trembling. Now, verse 7 says trembling. The whole idea of trembling here is they are shivering. Shivering from fear of the Philistines. We have never read about the Israelites being so frightful. And so now we had read earlier on in chapter 10, Samuel tells Saul, I'm going to go to Gilgal. Just wait for me 7 days. And when the time comes, I'll be there to show you what to do. And so now there was another 7 days. And so Saul waited 7 days according to the appointed time set by Samuel. Now, the idea of the day of appointment, it is commonly believed was the appointed time was in the morning. But Samuel did not arrive. And the people were scattering from him. The idea here of scattering is dispersed. What does that mean? That the people were not going to hang around when the Philistines strike. And they will go after the king, obviously, right? And so in verse 9, Saul says, bring me to the burnt offering and the peace offering. And he offered the burnt offering. Now, what did he do? 7 days, wait. By the morning of the 7 days, they stopped waiting. And this is a very serious affair. When God is there amongst them to lead them to handle their problems, they relied on the king, who's just like them. And the king is not above the Torah. And after he has gone into the track record, and he says, last time I had waited 7 days, and now 7 days are here. The time that he said he will come, he didn't come. And so he thought to himself, is Samuel really not coming? Verse 10. This is serious case. He finished the offering of the burnt offering. He actually made offering. As soon as he had completed, right? Completed offering means an offering that has smoke that will burn. And so it's also called the burnt offering. After he did that, now is that a problem? Obviously, he's a problem. He is from Benjamin. He is not a Levite, and he's not a priest. And nobody is supposed to do anything with the altar. And look, Samuel came, Saul went out to meet him and to greet him. Verse 11. But Samuel said, "What have you done?" And Saul said, "Because I saw that the people were scattering from me, and that you did not come within the appointed days, and that the Philistines were assembling at Michmash." Meaning, there they are in their place, and they did not invite the Philistines to come. The Philistines have decided to come in full strength. I think they are probably thinking of wiping out Israel because they have become stinking. And in the Oriental form, it is a nice word of saying they just look like and smell like cow pie. And Samuel said, "Why did you do this, Saul?" So the idea here, what have you done, is about Saul. What did Saul do? Saul went to offer the burnt offering. Now, that is a serious violation. And then the people were scattering from me, and that you did not come. So I just wanted to hurry up and get this over and done with. And so Samuel said, the whole thing is not about offering. Verse 12. Therefore I said, I means Samuel. Samuel said, now the Philistines will come down from against me at Gilgal, and I have not asked the favor of the Lord. Meaning, Samuel said, I did not consult God this time, so I forced myself and offered the burnt offering. And right here, Samuel hasn't arrived, and Saul couldn't wait because he was looking at the impending doom of the 30,000 chariots of the Philistines, and then the 6,000 of horsemen, and so many more walking on foot. And so the excuse, sorry. Therefore, Saul had the excuse to say that the Philistines is coming, and what can they do? And he is very urgently seeking the hand of God in this matter. And so Saul did not ask the favor. Now, the word favor here, in verse 12, doesn't mean favor in that sense. He did not ask the face of the Lord. He did not, how should you say, he did not approach God. That's what he didn't do. And while he didn't do, he says, I forced myself and offered the burnt offering. This very interesting expression here, isn't it? I forced myself. Well, the idea here is I forced myself means I strengthened myself. Why? Because offering the burnt offering should not be done. And he knew it. And so he had to, well, I guess in modern day, we say he has to psych himself up. He has to rationalize in his mind why he should do the burnt offering. And that is what his excuse is. There is an impending danger. You're not here, Samuel. I really didn't want to do this, but I had no choice. I just bite the bullet and said, I'm going to do it. Now, observe verse 13. Verse 13 says this. And Samuel said to Saul, "You have acted foolishly. You have been foolish. You have caused yourself to be a fool." Now understand this. This is being silly. And the fool really tells himself there is no God. He is not thinking about God. And that's what it means by acting foolishly, right? Not thinking about God. That's why it's called acting foolishly. Now, Samuel also said this: "You have not kept the commandment of the Lord your God." Now, what does that mean? This is important. The word kept is shamar. You have not guarded, right? You have not observed. You have not followed. You have not waited, which is a commandment of the Lord. And all of these are God's instructions. And he says, "The Lord your God, which he commanded you, the king." You have to listen to your God, but guess what? You also have to listen to your prophet, because your prophet listens to me, God says. Samuel listens to me, and Samuel will be able to handle being a peer to you, Saul. So, in the entire framework of the nation of Israel, we would have now an understanding of king and prophet. It is the king who will be the ruler over all, and the king needs to listen to the prophet so that he stay in line with what God wants. The prophet is ready to guide the footsteps of the king and the people to run the correct path of God. Now, I want you to observe the punishment. When you acted foolishly and you did not keep the commandment of the Lord your God, and it was already said yesterday, very important for Saul and the people is to fear God and do what is right before God. And the conclusion is, for now, the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. Olam. If you hadn't done this, God would have made sure your kingship would continue to perpetuate. Verse 14. But now your kingdom shall not endure. The word not endure means not arise. Not just not endure, but not arise. So you must think of it. The seat, right? The royal seat. The royal seat is set to rise up. It is set to rise up. And in principle, when God made Saul king, he had expected Saul's kingship to continue for as long as it can. And Saul must know that his kingship was blessed and chosen by God, and that if he keeps the word and commandment of God, then he will have a continuation of his kingdom. And so God says, "I don't want you. You don't even observe my law. Your kingdom will not continue. The Lord has sought out for himself a man after his own heart, and the Lord has appointed him as the ruler over his people, because you have not kept what the Lord commanded you. A man after his own heart is one who would keep what the Lord commanded. This is important. Not kept, not guarded. What is so important? When God appointed him as ruler over God's people, it's still God's people. The caretaker is merely the king. The king doesn't own the people. The king walks among the people, and the king has authority over the people, but he doesn't own the people. The people belongs to God. And so we have this statement: the people of God. The Israelites are the people of God, and he has appointed Saul as king. That's basically what we have. And God says, your kingdom will not endure. It means that your kingship will disappear. Now, you need to be very careful when we say that the kingship will disappear. Now ties back to 1 Samuel chapter 13, verse 1. Because it was into the year of his reign that all these things happened. And he did not guard the commandment of God. We come to the end of our session today, and I ask you to read on till the end of this book, and also for the next 2 chapters up until chapter 15. And this is to understand how God works with Israel. He did not destroy them because they chose a king, but now that this king that they had chosen had acted on his accord to go and fight the Philistines, and they are now persecuted in all sides, and they do not have an answer to the army of the Philistines. And so he went to seek for help. To who? To the prophet Samuel, because Samuel has been able to converse with God, and everything he said had come to pass. And in verses 14 and 15, we will see tomorrow, what we have here is the first of the 2 judgments, that your kingship is gone. Finito. That there will be no son of yours that will become king. That is exactly what it said. You are now king. When the time comes to an end, you are no longer king, and nobody else from your descendants will inherit the throne. And so here we have the first 14 verses of 1 Samuel chapter 13. With this, we come to the end of our sessions tonight.